an original story created exclusively for Golden Romance Empire. Elise Chen stared at her reflection in the penthouse window, the city lights below blurring through her tears as she clutched the phone in her trembling hand. 30 floors below, life continued, oblivious to how her world had just shattered with a single text message. Behind her, the door clicked open. Alexander Reid, her husband of convenience, stepped in with his perfect suit and cold eyes, unaware. She now knew about the other woman. 6 months ago, she'd signed away her freedom at the altar to save her dying mother, accepting a marriage contract with Manhattan's most ruthless CEO. Now, as rain began to streak the glass and Alexander's footsteps approached, Elise turned to face him, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Who is Jessica? And how long have you been lying to me?" The hospital corridors had become Elise Chen's second home over the past 3 months. Once, she'd walked red carpets and charity galas as the daughter of one of New York's oldest families. Now, she navigated sterile hallways, counting the dwindling funds that kept her mother alive. "Miss Chen." The specialist's voice was gentle but firm. "We need to discuss your mother's treatment options." Elise nodded, knowing what was coming. Her mother's heart condition had worsened, requiring specialized care their insurance no longer covered. Her father had gambled away their fortune before disappearing overseas, leaving nothing but debts and a name that opened doors but couldn't pay bills. "The procedure she needs." The doctor hesitated. "It's experimental. Insurance won't cover it." "How much?" Elise asked, her voice hollow. When he named the figure, Elise felt the floor shift beneath her. More money than she could raise in years, let alone weeks. That evening, she sat beside her sleeping mother, watching the monitors track each precious heartbeat. Catherine Chen had once been the picture of elegance and strength. Now she looked fragile, diminished by illness and betrayal. "Miss Chen." The deep voice startled her. "May I speak with you privately?" Elise turned to find Victor Reid standing in the doorway. Billionaire, business titan, and a man her grandfather had once mentored decades ago. She'd never spoken to him directly, though everyone in New York knew his empire and his ruthless reputation. In the hospital cafeteria, Victor studied her with calculating eyes. "I've always admired your family, Elise. Your grandfather gave me my first real opportunity when no one else would consider a man from my background. That's kind of you to remember, Mr. Reid. But I don't understand why you're here. I know about your situation." His smile never reached his eyes. "Your mother's condition, your family's, financial challenges." Elise stiffened. "That's private. Nothing truly is in our circles." He leaned forward. "I have a proposition that would solve your problems permanently. I'm not selling what's left of my family's estate. I'm not interested in your property." Victor's voice softened to something almost paternal. "I'm interested in your name, your connections, your bloodline." Elise frowned. "I don't understand. My son Alexander needs a wife." Victor stated it like a business fact. Someone with the right background, the right family history. The absurdity of it made Elise laugh. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious." Victor slid a folder across the table. "Inside is my offer. I will cover all of your mother's medical expenses, past, present, and future. The best care, the best doctors. I'll also settle your family's outstanding debts and provide you with a generous monthly allowance in exchange for marrying your son." Elise's voice rose. "This isn't the 19th century, Mr. Reid. No, it's the 21st, where medical bankruptcy destroys thousands while men like me decide who lives and who dies with the stroke of a pen." His smile remained pleasant. "My son needs legitimacy that only old money can provide. You need money that only new wealth can deliver. It's a perfect arrangement." Elise stood up. "This is insane." "Is it? More insane than watching your mother die when you could save her." Victor remained seated. "Take the folder. Read it. You have 48 hours. For 2 days, Elise barely slept. She researched Alexander Reid, Harvard Business School, 32 years old, ruthlessly effective CEO who had doubled the Reid Group's value in 5 years. The business press called him brilliant, but cold. Society pages showed him at events, always impeccably dressed, rarely smiling, occasionally with stunning women who never appeared twice. On the second night, her mother's condition worsened. As doctors rushed to stabilize her, Elise stood in the hallway, clutching her phone with Victor Reid's number displayed on the screen. She pressed call. "I'll do it," she said when he answered, "but I have conditions." The wedding was planned with military precision. Elise met Alexander Reid exactly twice before the ceremony, once to sign the contract, once for the engagement announcement. He was taller than his photos suggested, with sharp features and dark eyes that assessed her with clinical detachment. "This arrangement benefits us both," he said during their first meeting, not bothering with pleasantries. "I expect discretion and appropriate public behavior. And I expect you to honor the agreement your father made," Elise replied, matching his tone. "My mother's care comes first." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "We'll get along fine if you remember this is a business transaction, not a love match." The Reid publicity machine transformed their arrangement into a romantic fairy tale. Finance titan's son weds old New York heiress dominated society pages. Their engagement photos looked convincing. Alexander's hand resting possessively on her waist, Elise smiling up at him with practiced warmth. Nobody saw her cry the night before the wedding. Nobody knew she visited her mother's hospital room in her wedding gown, whispering, "I'm doing this for you. Please get better." The ceremony was held at St. Patrick's Cathedral. With 500 guests, neither of them had chosen. Elise walked down the aisle alone, her ivory gown worth more than her family's remaining possessions combined. Alexander waited at the altar, handsome and remote in his bespoke tuxedo. When he took her hand, his touch was cool and impersonal. "You look beautiful," he whispered for the benefit of the front row. "Let's just get this over with," she replied through her perfect smile. They exchanged vows beneath soaring arches and stained glass, promising forever while planning for convenience. When Alexander kissed her, the cameras flashed, capturing what looked like passion, but felt like sealing a contract. In the limousine afterward, he immediately loosened his tie and put distance between them. "The penthouse has been prepared for you," checking his phone. "My housekeeper will show you around tomorrow. I have separate quarters, so you'll have privacy." Elise stared out the window as Manhattan glided by. "When do we discuss how this actually works?" "It works however we need it to work publicly," Alexander replied without looking up. "Privately, we lead separate lives. I have commitments. I assume you'll want to spend time with your mother, and if people ask questions, they won't," he said with absolute certainty. "Not if we play our parts correctly." The wedding reception lasted until midnight. They danced. They cut cake. They accepted congratulations with practiced gratitude. No one suspected that when they left for their honeymoon, Alexander would drop her at the penthouse before flying alone to Tokyo for business. As the elevator carried her up to her new gilded cage, Elise wondered if saving her mother's life was worth sacrificing her own. The Reid penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek tower in Tribeca, all glass and steel, with panoramic views that made Manhattan seem like a glittering toy kingdom. Elise learned its dimensions by pacing. 62 steps from the master bedroom to the kitchen. 48 from the living room to Alexander's separate suite, which remained perpetually locked. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, explained the rules on Elise's first morning. "Mr. Reid prefers breakfast at 5:30 a.m., though he often takes it in his office. He returns late, sometimes not at all. The staff leaves by 8 p.m. unless there's an event." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "Your schedule is your own, Mrs. Reid, but Mr. Reid would appreciate knowing when you'll be out, for security purposes." "And if I want to redecorate?" Elise asked, looking around the pristine but soulless space. "The public areas remain as they are for entertaining. Your private rooms are yours to modify, within reason. Within reason." Everything in her new life came with that qualifier. Alexander's schedule was punishing. He left before dawn and returned well after midnight, moving through the penthouse like a ghost. On the rare mornings they crossed paths, their exchanges were brief and formal. "There's a charity gala next Thursday," he might say, not looking up from his coffee. "The car will pick you up at 7. "I'll be at the hospital until 6, she would reply. "I'll meet you there." "Fine, wear the blue Valentino. The photographer from Vanity Fair will be there." Her days fell into a pattern. Mornings in the silent penthouse, afternoons at her mother's bedside, evenings either alone or playing the devoted wife at carefully selected events. Catherine Chen's health improved steadily under the care Alexander's money provided, the only genuine comfort in Elise's new reality. Their public appearances were meticulously choreographed. Alexander would place his hand at the small of her back, lean close to whisper comments that looked intimate, but were usually mundane observations. Elise would laugh at the right moments, gaze adoringly when cameras turned their way, accept compliments about their perfect match with practiced gratitude. "You're quite good at this," Alexander remarked after a particularly successful dinner with Japanese investors. They completely believed we're madly in love. "Theater was my minor in college," Elise replied dryly, "before I had to drop out to care for my mother." Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps surprise that she had aspirations beyond being an heiress. But the moment passed, and he returned to his phone. 3 months into their marriage, Elise realized she knew almost nothing about her husband beyond his public persona. His closet contained identical suits, arranged by shade. His bathroom held expensive, but generic products. His bookshelves displayed business texts and biographies of successful men. Nothing revealing personal taste or passion. The only hint of humanity came from his piano, a gleaming Steinway in a corner of the living room. Once, returning early from the hospital, she heard him playing something melancholy and complex. When he noticed her, he stopped immediately, closed the lid, and walked away without acknowledging the moment. On their 4-month anniversary, not that either acknowledged the date, Elise received a text from an unknown number while having lunch at her mother's bedside. "Is he treating you well? You deserve better than being Victor's pawn." When she didn't respond, another came through. "This is Sophia. I worked with Alexander before you. Just checking you're okay." Elise blocked the number, her hand trembling. That night, she Googled Sophia Alexander Reid and found dozens of photos of her husband with a striking woman with copper hair, at business functions, charity events, even vacation spots. The captions described her as Reid Group Creative Director, and occasionally, Alexander Reid's rumored girlfriend. The article stopped abruptly 3 weeks before her engagement announcement. "Who is Sophia?" she asked Alexander the next morning, one of the rare breakfasts he was present for. He stilled, then continued buttering his toast. "A former colleague." "Just a colleague." "She was the creative director for our European division. She's in London now." "That doesn't answer my question." Alexander's eyes met hers, cold and warning. "Our arrangement doesn't include discussing my past relationships, or future ones, for that matter." The implication hung between them like ice. "The contract specified fidelity during our marriage," Elise said carefully. "It specified the appearance of fidelity," he corrected. "What happens behind closed doors is our own business, as long as it stays private." After that, Elise began noticing patterns. Alexander's late nights at the office often coincided with certain names appearing on his calendar. His business trips frequently extended by a day or two without explanation. Sometimes he returned with the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume clinging to his collar. She told herself it didn't matter. Their marriage was a transaction, not a relationship. She had what she wanted, her mother's health, and he had what he needed, her family name and public cooperation. Yet something sharp twisted inside her when his phone would light up late at night with messages he quickly concealed, or when she overheard hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when she entered a room. 6 months into their marriage, Elise stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching rain streak the glass. Behind her, the penthouse echoed with emptiness. Her mother was improving steadily, already talking about traveling again. The prison Elise had willingly entered had served its purpose. She wondered how long she would have to remain inside it, playing a role in a story written by men who saw her as nothing but a means to an end. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. The Thompson Charity Gala was tomorrow night. Another performance as Manhattan's most envied couple awaited. She had no idea it would be the night everything changed. The Thompson Charity Gala was the social event of the season, transforming the Metropolitan Museum of Art into a wonderland of champagne fountains and floral arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Elise wore a silver gown that caught the light with every movement. Her hair swept up to showcase the Reid family diamonds Alexander had presented to her that evening, another prop for their performance. "You look appropriate," he'd said when the car picked them up, the closest thing to a compliment he'd offered in weeks. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his hand at her waist, her smile bright enough to convince anyone watching that she adored him. Camera flashes followed them, capturing what the society pages would call Manhattan's golden couple. "The Thompsons are key investors in our Asian expansion," Alexander murmured as they approached their table. "Be especially charming." Elise smiled through gritted teeth. "When am I not?" For 2 hours, she played her role perfectly, laughing at mediocre jokes, asking interested questions about businesses she cared nothing about, deflecting inquiries about when they might start a family with practiced vagueness. Alexander performed equally well, occasionally touching her hand or leaning close to whisper something that made her smile, as if sharing intimate thoughts rather than instructions. During the charity auction, his phone buzzed repeatedly on the table. He glanced at it, his expression changing subtly. "Excuse me," he said, standing. "I need to take this. Beijing office emergency." As he walked away, his phone buzzed again. Without thinking, Elise glanced down. The name Jessica flashed on the screen, along with the first line of a text. "Can't wait to see you tonight after your boring charity." The rest was cut off, but Elise didn't need to see more. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her champagne. Jessica. Not Sophia from his past, but someone new. Someone current. When Alexander returned 15 minutes later, his collar slightly askew, Elise was prepared. She smiled, danced when asked, and continued her flawless performance. Only the tightness around her eyes might have betrayed her to someone who knew her well. But Alexander didn't know her at all. In the car ride home, she remained silent, watching raindrops race down the window while Alexander checked emails. The storm that had threatened all evening had finally broken, matching her internal turmoil. "The Thompson deal should close this week," he remarked absently. "Your charm worked wonders." Elise said nothing, waiting until they reached the penthouse. As the elevator doors closed behind them, she finally spoke. "Who is Jessica?" Alexander froze momentarily before continuing to remove his tie. "A colleague." Like Sophia was a colleague. His eyes narrowed. "Have you been checking my phone?" "I didn't need to." "Her message appeared while you were taking your emergency call from Beijing." Elise kicked off her heels, suddenly not caring about the diamonds or the designer dress. "How many women are you sleeping with while I play the devoted wife?" "Lower your voice," he said coldly. "The staff. The staff left hours ago, and I don't give a damn who hears me anyway." Elise's control finally snapped. 6 months of this charade, Alexander. 6 months of smiling for cameras, while you treat me like a convenient accessory. I fulfilled my part of this bargain. The least you could do is respect me enough not to flaunt your affairs. Our arrangement. "I know what our arrangement is," she cut him off. "But the contract specified discretion. What happens when someone catches you? When Jessica gets tired of being your secret and goes to the press? What happens to my reputation then?" Alexander's expression hardened. "That won't happen." "It already is happening." Elise laughed bitterly. "I get texts, Alexander. Anonymous messages, asking if I know my husband is cheating. Sophia reached out months ago. How many others know? You're overreacting." He moved toward the bar, pouring himself a scotch with steady hands. "Jessica understands the situation. Because her message suggested she's tired of waiting for you to finish your boring charity thing with your wife." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "You don't understand how this works. Explain it to me then." Elise stepped closer, fury overriding caution. "Explain how you get everything. My family name, a perfect wife for the cameras, and women on the side, while I get nothing but a gilded cage and public humiliation." "You got exactly what you wanted," he snapped. "Your mother's alive because of me. Your family's debts are paid because of me. Don't pretend you're some innocent victim." The truth of his words stung, but Elise refused to back down. "I never claimed to be innocent, but I thought you had integrity. thought you at least respected what we agreed to. This marriage isn't real, Alexander said coldly. It never was. It's real to everyone watching. It's real on paper. It's real enough that when you're caught, I'll be the pathetic wife who wasn't enough for Alexander Reid. He slammed his glass down. What do you want from me, Elise? An apology? Money? I want you to honor your word, she said quietly, or end this now. Alexander stared at her, something unreadable crossing his face. Then he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You think it's that simple? That my father would allow a divorce 6 months in, that your mother's care would continue if you walked away. The threat hung between them, crystallizing everything wrong with their arrangement. You're not trapped, Elise said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You're just a coward who refuses to choose. Alexander's face went rigid. Without another word, he grabbed his keys from the counter and stalked toward the elevator. Where are you going? Elise called after him. Out, he snarled. Away from this, from you. The elevator doors closed on his furious face. Elise stood alone in the vast penthouse, the diamonds at her throat suddenly heavy as chains. 3 hours later, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number, a clinical voice. Mrs. Reid. This is Manhattan General Hospital. Your husband has been in an accident. The hospital waiting room was a blur of harsh lights and hushed voices. Elise sat rigidly in an uncomfortable chair, still wearing her gala dress. The Reid diamonds exchanged for a visitor's pass that hung around her neck. Mrs. Reid. The surgeon looked exhausted as he approached. Your husband is stable. The car rolled several times, but the airbags deployed correctly. He has a concussion, 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, and significant bruising. He'll need physical therapy. But there's no permanent damage. Elise nodded mechanically. When can he come home? We'll keep him for observation for at least 48 hours. After that, he'll need care at home. Will that be possible? She thought of the empty penthouse, of their separate lives, of the words they'd hurled at each other hours earlier. Yes, I'll arrange everything. Alexander was barely conscious when she entered his room. His face was pale beneath dark bruises, his right arm immobilized, monitors beeping steadily beside him. He looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. His eyes flickered open when she approached. Recognition. Then confusion crossed his face. You came, he whispered, his voice rough. Of course I came. I'm your wife. The word felt strange on her tongue after their argument. He closed his eyes again. The other car is everyone. No one else was hurt, she said quietly. Just you. Relief washed over his face before pain medications pulled him back under. Elise sat beside him until dawn, watching his chest rise and fall, wondering why she felt anything besides anger toward the man who had treated their marriage as nothing but a business convenience. The next 2 days passed in a haze of medical consultations and arrangements. Elise hired nurses, ordered medical equipment for the penthouse, and rescheduled Alexander's meetings. She visited her mother between hospital shifts, explaining enough to satisfy her curiosity without revealing the full truth of her marriage. You don't have to do this, Victor Reid said when he visited his son. He studied Elise with new interest, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. We can move him to a private facility. He's coming home, Elise replied firmly. That's what a wife would do. Victor's expression shifted to something almost like respect. Yes, I suppose it is. When Alexander was released, Elise rode with him in the private ambulance. He was silent during the transfer, his jaw tight with pain or pride. She couldn't tell which. The penthouse had been transformed. A hospital bed occupied one corner of Alexander's suite. Medical supplies discreetly arranged nearby. Nurses would attend during the day. But nights would be Elise's responsibility, her choice, though Alexander didn't know that. The first week was awkward and tense. Alexander was a terrible patient, irritable, demanding, and clearly uncomfortable with his own weakness. He snapped at the nurses and barely acknowledged Elise except to ask for medication or assistance. You don't have to hover, he said on the 4th night as she adjusted his pillows. The night nurse can handle this. I sent her home, Elise replied calmly. I'm perfectly capable of checking your vitals and managing your medication. Why? His eyes, sharp despite the pain, fixed on her face. After what happened. What I said. Elise busied herself with straightening his blankets. Because regardless of our arrangement, you're hurt. And I'm not the kind of person who walks away from that. Something shifted in his expression. Thank you, he said finally, the words sounding rusty from disuse. As days turned to weeks, Alexander's physical healing brought subtle changes. The forced intimacy of care broke down barriers neither had recognized. Elise learned his habits, how he preferred the blinds partially open at night, how he read business reports to distract himself from pain, how he struggled to ask for help, even when he clearly needed it. Alexander, in turn, began to see Elise beyond her role. He noticed how she hummed absently while organizing his medications, how she never complained, despite the interrupted sleep, how she fielded business calls with surprising competence when he was too exhausted to take them. One night, a month after the accident, Elise found him attempting to walk unassisted to the kitchen. "You're supposed to use the walker," she scolded, rushing to his side. "I'm tired of being helpless," he muttered, but accepted her support. In the kitchen, she made tea while he leaned against the counter. Watching her move efficiently through the space that had once felt foreign to them both. "Why did you stay?" he asked suddenly. "After what you found out, after our fight, you could have let my father handle everything." Elise considered the question as she poured hot water into mugs. "At first I stayed because it was the right thing to do. Then because—" she paused, searching for words. "Because I realized I knew nothing about the man I married. And maybe this was my chance to find out." "And what have you discovered?" His voice was carefully neutral. "That you play piano when you think no one's listening. That you read poetry, hidden inside business journals. That you call your assistants' children on their birthdays." She handed him his tea. "That there's more to you than the cold CEO everyone sees." Alexander stared into his mug. "The night of the accident, I wasn't with Jessica." Elise stilled. "You don't owe me explanations." "I do, actually." He met her gaze directly. "I ended things with her that night. I told her our arrangement was over." "Why?" "Because you were right. About everything." He struggled with the words. "I was a coward. Taking everything and giving nothing. Hiding behind a contract instead of facing what I'd agreed to." The confession hung between them, unexpected and raw. "My father arranged my entire life," Alexander continued quietly. "The schools, the career, the social connections. When he brought up this marriage, I told myself it was just another business deal. That my personal life could remain separate. And now," Elise asked, "now I realize there's no separating the pieces. That the man who makes promises should be the same man in private as in public." He set down his mug. "I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable, at admitting mistakes, but I'm trying to be better." Elise nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I can't promise to suddenly become someone else," Alexander said, "but I can promise to stop hiding from who I already am." It wasn't a declaration of love or even affection, but as they stood in the midnight kitchen, it felt like the first honest moment of their marriage. Spring arrived, bringing color back to the city and strength back to Alexander. As his physical therapy progressed, the medical equipment gradually disappeared from the penthouse. The nurses made their final visits. Life should have returned to their previous arrangement, separate and distant. Instead, something had shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. Alexander still worked punishing hours, but now he texted when he'd be late. Sometimes he brought dinner home, setting out containers of Thai food or Italian pasta on the kitchen island where they would eat together, discussing their days with growing ease. Elise continued visiting her mother, now recovered enough to move to a comfortable apartment Elise had found for her. But she also began exploring her own interests again, finishing her degree online, volunteering at a theater program for underprivileged youth, slowly reclaiming parts of herself she'd set aside. The penthouse itself transformed. Elise added throws and pillows to the stark furniture, placed fresh flowers on tables, left books open on the coffee table. Alexander didn't object when family photos appeared, or when she replaced his minimalist art with warmer pieces. They still maintained separate bedrooms, but the invisible wall between their lives had begun to crumble. The change crystallized one evening in late April. Elise was reading in the living room when Alexander returned from work earlier than usual, carrying a small package. "This came for you," he said, handing it over. Inside was a vintage playbill from a Broadway show she'd once mentioned loving in passing. A small note read, "Saw this and thought of you." The gesture was so unexpected, so personal, that Elise couldn't find words. "It's nothing," Alexander said, misreading her silence. "Just something I happened to see. No one's given me a gift just because in years," she said finally. "Thank you." He nodded awkwardly and turned to leave, but Elise called after him, "Would you like a drink?" "I opened a bottle of wine earlier." That night they talked for hours, not about business or appearances, but about themselves. Alexander described growing up under Victor's impossible standards, always measuring himself against benchmarks that shifted just out of reach. Elise spoke of her mother's devotion and her father's betrayal, of dreams deferred when family responsibility called. "I wanted to act, you know," she admitted after her second glass of wine. "Not professionally, necessarily, but I loved it, being someone else for a little while." "Isn't that what we've both been doing?" Alexander asked quietly. "Playing parts instead of being ourselves?" The question lingered between them, honest and challenging. As weeks passed, their evenings together became more frequent. They discovered shared interests in obscure films and classical music. Alexander admitted he'd played piano since childhood, his mother's influence, before cancer took her when he was 12. One night, after gentle persuasion, he played for Elise deliberately for the first time, his fingers moving over the keys with surprising tenderness. "Your mother would be proud," Elise said when he finished. "She would have liked you," he replied, the words slipping out before he could censor them. The comment hung in the air, charged with implications neither was ready to examine. In June, Victor Reid invited them to dinner at his estate, the first time since before the accident. As their car approached the imposing gates, Alexander tensed visibly. "We don't have to stay long," Elise said, instinctively reaching for his hand. He looked down at their joined fingers with surprise, then slowly turned his palm to intertwine with hers. "With you there, it might actually be bearable." Victor watched them closely throughout dinner, noting the easy way they communicated, the small attentions they paid each other. When Alexander excused himself to take a call, Victor turned his calculating gaze on Elise. "Something's changed between you two." Elise met his eyes steadily. "People do that, Mr. Reid. They change. My son never has, not until you." He studied her with new interest. "This wasn't part of our arrangement, you know, the genuine connection." "The best things rarely come from arrangements," Elise replied. "They happen despite them." Later that night, returning to the penthouse, Alexander was unusually quiet. As the elevator ascended, he finally spoke. "My father thinks you've accomplished something remarkable." "What's that?" "Humanizing me." His smile was self-deprecating. "Apparently, I'm less of a robot these days." Elise laughed. "High praise from Victor Reid. The highest." Alexander's expression grew serious as the elevator doors opened. "He's right, though. I am different with you." The penthouse was dark, except for the city lights streaming through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. They stood in the entryway, suddenly awkward despite months of growing comfort. "Elise," Alexander said her name like he was testing it. "I need to tell you something." She waited, heart inexplicably racing. "When we married, I resented you. Not because of who you were, but because of what you represented. Another of my father's manipulations. I was cruel and distant because I was angry at being controlled. I understand that now," she said softly. "But these past months," he stepped closer, "getting to know the real you, beyond the arrangement, beyond the contract. I've never had anyone see me the way you do. Never had anyone stay when they could have walked away." The air between them seemed to vibrate with possibility. "What are you saying, Alexander?" "I'm saying I don't want to pretend anymore." His voice dropped. "Not about us. Not about how I feel when you're in the room, or when you laugh, or when you challenge me to be better than I am." Elise felt the world tilting beneath her feet. "How do you feel?" Instead of answering with words, Alexander closed the distance between them. His hand came up to cradle her face, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their first real kiss was nothing like the performative one they'd shared at their wedding. This was tentative, then certain, then hungry with months of unacknowledged longing. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Alexander pressed his forehead to hers. "I think I'm falling in love with my wife." Wonder and vulnerability in every word. Elise smiled against his lips. What a coincidence. I might be falling for my husband, too. The morning sun filtered through the bedroom curtains, painting golden stripes across the tangled sheets. Elise woke slowly, aware of Alexander's arm draped protectively around her waist, his breathing deep and even against her neck. 2 months had passed since that first genuine kiss, transforming their carefully separated lives into something neither had anticipated. She slipped from his embrace and padded to the bathroom, where her gaze fell on the unopened box on the counter. She'd bought it 3 days ago, but hadn't found the courage to use it. Now, with trembling hands, she opened the pregnancy test and followed the instructions. 3 minutes, the longest of her life. When the result appeared, Elise sat on the edge of the bathtub, overwhelmed, pregnant. A child conceived not from duty or arrangement, but from something that had grown naturally between them. "Elise?" Alexander's voice came from the bedroom. "Everything okay?" She emerged from the bathroom, test in hand, unable to find words. Alexander took one look at her face, then at what she was holding, and went completely still. "Is that?" His voice faltered. She nodded, watching emotions cascade across his face: shock, disbelief, and then something raw and powerful that made his eyes shine. "We're having a baby," he whispered, reaching for the test with unsteady fingers. "Apparently our arrangement has some unexpected clauses," Elise said, attempting humor though her own eyes filled with tears. Alexander pulled her into his arms with a gentleness that belied his intensity. "This changes everything," he murmured against her hair. "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. He drew back to look at her, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified, yes. Overwhelmed, absolutely, but mostly. He placed a hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Mostly I feel like I've been given something I never knew I wanted until this moment." The pregnancy transformed their relationship yet again. Alexander became protective, rushing home from work to attend doctor's appointments, reading parenting books late into the night. Elise found herself falling deeper in love with this version of him. The man who left notes for her to find throughout the day, who talked to her belly when he thought she was sleeping. As her first trimester progressed, they began discussing the future, not just the baby's nursery, but their life together. The contract that had brought them together seemed like a relic from another time. "I want this child to have a different father than I had," Alexander said one evening as they sat on the terrace, the city glittering below them. "I want to be present, supportive. I want them to know they're loved for who they are, not what they achieve." Elise squeezed his hand. "You already are different. The very fact that you're worried about it proves that." Their bubble of happiness burst on a crisp October morning, when Victor Reid arrived, unannounced, at the penthouse. His face was thunderous as he strode past Elise. "Explain to me why the Tokyo merger documents haven't been signed," he demanded of Alexander. "The deadline was yesterday." Alexander remained calm. "Because I'm not signing them. The terms would require laying off 3,000 workers. I've proposed an alternative structure." Victor's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a negotiation. The board has already approved my approach." "The board will reconsider when they see my projections." Alexander's voice was firm. "We can be profitable without destroying families." "Since when do you care about the personal impact of business decisions?" Victor sneered. "Is this her influence?" He jerked his head toward Elise. "This is me making decisions I can live with," Alexander replied evenly. "As CEO, and as a man who's about to become a father." The words hung in the air. Victor's expression shifted from anger to calculation in an instant. "A child." His tone softened dramatically. "Why didn't you tell me?" "We were waiting until after the first trimester," Elise said, moving to stand beside Alexander. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "This is wonderful news. A Reid heir." He clapped Alexander on the shoulder. "We should celebrate. Dinner tonight at the house. We have much to discuss, the baby's future, trust funds, educational planning. After he left, Alexander's jaw was tight with tension. He's already plotting how to control our child's life. Then we don't let him, Elise said simply. That evening, they arrived at Victor's mansion to find not an intimate dinner, but a gathering of board members and key investors. Victor raised a toast to the continuation of the Reid legacy, speaking of the unborn child, as if it were another business acquisition. Later, in Victor's study, he laid out his vision. The child will attend Westfield Academy, of course. I've already spoken to the headmaster about securing a place. Then Harvard, like Alexander. I'm establishing a trust with certain performance requirements. No. Alexander's voice cut through his father's monologue. Victor blinked. Excuse me. No trust with strings attached. No predetermined life path. Our child will make their own choices. Don't be naive, Victor scoffed. This child represents the future of everything we've built. This child represents the future of our family, Elise interjected. Not your company. Victor's expression hardened. May I remind you both that your comfortable life exists because of my generosity, your marriage, your mother's health care, your position. All of it came from me. And we've repaid that debt many times over, Alexander said quietly. But it ends now. What exactly does that mean? Victor's voice was dangerous. Alexander took Elise's hand. It means if you want any relationship with your grandchild, you accept our boundaries. No manipulation, no control. If you can't do that, we'll walk away. Walk away? Victor laughed incredulously. To what? You think you can leave the Reid Group? Everything you have is tied to that name. Then we'll build something new, Alexander replied with calm certainty. Something that belongs to us, not you. The threat hung in the air between them. For the first time, Elise saw fear flash across Victor's face. Not fear of losing money or power, but fear of losing his son completely. You would choose her, this arrangement, over your birthright? Victor asked, his voice barely controlled. Alexander looked at Elise, his expression softening. This stopped being an arrangement a long time ago. And yes, I choose her. I choose our child. I choose the life we're building. The drive home was silent, both processing the magnitude of what had just happened. As they entered the penthouse, Alexander pulled Elise close. Did you mean it? She asked against his chest. About walking away from everything. The company, the money, the name. None of it matters compared to you and our baby. His hand rested protectively over her stomach. For the first time in my life, I know what's truly valuable. And I won't let my father poison that the way he poisoned everything else. Elise reached up to touch his face. We're going to be okay, you know, whatever happens. I know, he smiled, the worry lines easing from his forehead. Because we chose this. We chose each other. 6 months later, in the early hours of a spring morning, their daughter was born, Lily Catherine Reid. 7 pounds of fierce determination and possibility. As Alexander held her for the first time, his face transformed with a joy Elise had never seen before. Hello, little one, he whispered. You are so loved, just as you are, always. In the corner of the hospital room, Victor Reid stood awkwardly holding a stuffed bear. The months since their confrontation had brought tentative changes, therapy sessions, difficult conversations, small steps toward a healthier relationship. He was trying, imperfectly but sincerely. She's beautiful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. May I? Alexander hesitated only briefly before carefully transferring his daughter to her grandfather's arms. Victor cradled her with unexpected tenderness. I'm going to do better with her, he promised quietly. Better than I did with you. Later that night, in the privacy of their hospital room, Alexander sat beside Elise's bed, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For saying yes that day in the hospital cafeteria. His fingers traced gentle patterns on her hand. For seeing something in me worth staying for. For showing me what love actually looks like. Elise smiled tiredly. Who would have thought Victor's manipulation would lead to this? Sometimes the wrong beginnings lead to the right endings. Alexander replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. And this is just our beginning. Outside the window, dawn broke over the city they both loved, painting the sky in promises of new possibilities. In the quiet room, surrounded by the family, they had built from an arrangement neither had wanted. Elise and Alexander Reid held onto each other, no longer bound by contract, but by choice.